Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's panel discussion. We're going to go ahead and get started. Um, Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. We are holding a political discussion tonight called DSA Crashes the Party, DSA's Response to the Democratic National Convention. My name is Walida. I am a member of Chicago DSA, and I will be hosting tonight's panel. So thank you for everyone for joining us, and thank you to the panelists for being here. Okay, so DSA is proud to be one of the organizers and coalition partners for the March on the DNC Coalition. And we're excited to talk tonight about some important things around DSA's actions this week and our political programming this year for this election year and beyond, and hopefully contextualize both the organization and our politics around this election year. So just to briefly go over the agenda, we're going to have some discussions on who we are, a little history about the DNC here in Chicago, why we're marching on the DNC, DSA's involvement with Not Another Bomb and the labor organizing around it, our political program or national political program called Workers Deserve More, and why you should consider joining. And each segment will be between 10 to 15 minutes, give or take, and we will wrap up with some Q&A at the end. The chat is closed to general conversation. However, you can pose your questions in the chat for the panelists throughout the evening. And the hosts and the chat moderators will gather them and pass them along when we get to the Q&A section. So please feel free to do that. If you have a question for a specific panelist or a specific section, just note that and we will try to route that question to the person who spoke on it. Otherwise, the question will be open for all panelists. So with that, I would like to introduce our first panelist. Ashik Siddiq is the national co-chair of the Democratic Socialists of America. Ashik, take it away.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ashik Siddiq. I'm co-chair of DSA, which is the largest socialist organization in the United States in many generations. Great to be here talking today live from Chicago during the DNC at a kind of unprecedented political moment in modern U.S. history. We're now just still only a few weeks after a presidential candidate who's an incumbent who won the primaries was forced to drop out. And now Kamala Harris is the presumptive candidate being coronated, whatever the word is this week. And, I admit for a few weeks, I was enjoying the coconut memes and, talk about whether she is brat coded or is Tim Walsh a Midwestern princess or whatever. I think a lot of people are feeling a sense of possibility about this change that has really been forced by a lot of movement energy. But we in DSA, as socialists, we recognize that it's not about electing people who are going to take the right positions on things, not that Democrats have, and you'll hear a lot about that this hour. We know that real social change happens through organized movements that threaten the forces that have this power structure that has been allowing a genocide for 10 months now. And this has really been something that has motivated DSA alongside hundreds of thousands and millions of people who've been marching and protesting on the streets in the United States and all over the world, which is that there is an ongoing genocide in Gaza that is funded by U.S. taxpayer dollars, sending weapons to the state of Israel that has now massacred at least 40,000 people since October. A recent study found that there could be up to 186,000 total deaths in Gaza, and that's 8% of Gaza's entire population. And just compare that to any American city. Imagine that being flattened by a government, with no consent from the population that is supposedly represented by that government. So as socialists who are part of this anti-war left that is rebuilding in the United States, we know that we can't plausibly endorse an alternative to Biden that's part of a party that is enabling this genocide, and that's part of what we're representing here on the ground in Chicago and protesting the DNC. We're organizing alongside folks who are demanding an arms embargo against Israel, a permanent ceasefire, and an end to U.S. aid to Israel. And we know that's not just going to happen by people making the right moral choice. So you'll hear a lot this hour about what DSA is doing as an organization during this election, but just to say a little bit about what DSA is, elections are a moment where a lot of people, a lot of workers, working class people are paying attention to politics in a way that most people don't. It's not a normal thing to, spend all your time thinking about things that you don't feel like you have any opportunity to affect or change. Um, but we really want to let people know that in this election, your technical choices are between Democrats and Republicans, but you have another choice, which is to fight back. You can join a working class movement that can take on the far right, the rise of fascism in the United States and around the world, and you can also build an alternative to the centrist status quo Democrats that enable all this. So what is DSA? Like, we're not just, we're protesting, we're organizing with social movements, but we believe in building an alternative through organization. So what is the DSA difference? Like, this is something we talk about a lot. We believe we can build our own institutional power to challenge the power of capitalists, and we can do it from the bottom up in our workplaces, in our neighborhoods, and in elected office as part of our own independent collective organization. And we organize a lot of different kinds of campaigns, but we really don't organize around anything as a single issue. We see everything as interconnected. We don't live in a single issue world, and we see the root of all the problems in our society as capitalism, which infects our entire political system. So electoral politics is a core part of what we do, but we really believe that we're only as effective as we are because our engagement in electoral politics is deeply intertwined with all the other ways our members can organize that we build together. So a core part of that is organized labor. You'll hear about that from folks on this call today. We believe as socialists that a backbone, like the backbone of strong social movements that can win, is organized workers. Nothing is as strong as workers who organize to realize that our self-interest is aligned with oppressed people all over the world. And using the collective power that we build in our workplaces to organize not just to win demands in our own workplaces, but to expand our consciousness and solidarity with people throughout our society and all over the world. So just as an example of what that looks like in the United States, since the New Deal and the Civil Rights era and the environmental movement, like all these major things that workers in the United States won for decades through the mid 20th century, that happened because workers were extremely organized and powerful enough to threaten the forces of capital. And then there was a big retreat since the 1970s because unions were weakened. There are a lot of reasons for that. But it's been many decades in the United States since labor unions stood up against war and for internationalism. But just in the past few months, as an example, 7 major labor unions, including United Auto Workers, flight attendants, SEIU, postal workers, electrical workers, and the Painters Union, have called on the Biden administration to halt all military aid to Israel and demand an arms embargo beyond just a permanent ceasefire, which they also called 4 months ago, which was a huge breakthrough. And that happened. These unions representing hundreds of thousands of workers were able to demand this because people organized within their unions to reform their unions from the inside. And DSA members were part of that fight. We have a long-term theory of change that has at the core getting organized workers to demand things to get the social change that we want. So this is a huge intervention, and it's possible because people put in that work to organize over time. So UAW, as an example, they organized to win major contract fights last year against the big 3 auto companies, and on the strength of those wins, they were able to demand more and more to the point where they can make these internationalist demands. And Sean Fain, who's now the head of UAW, is talking about a general strike in 2028 as a major thing to organize around. So we're not just talking about, endorsing a candidate in a presidential election. We're talking now about organizing to change how millions of workers potentially could be organizing like 4 years from now. So that's a big change in, people's sense of possibility, and it's happening because of the kinds of organizing that we're serious about doing. So it's that kind of power that allows our socialist electeds in office to stand up for the people, no matter how the powers that be try to silence them. So that's what empowers people like Rashida Tlaib in Congress as a Palestinian woman from Detroit to stand up and say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And she's been censured for saying that in Congress, but it kind of doesn't matter because she has a very strong base of people in her district and across the country who support her. And who will stand with her. The way she stands up for Palestinian people, the way she stands up for workers, the way she stands up for people whose water has been poisoned. This is possible because of what we build as an alternative. And this is what empowered people like Cori Bush in St. Louis, who got elected to Congress as an organizer with Black Lives Matter, who's demanding justice for Mike Brown and Black people killed by police to get elected. And she was a champion for the ceasefire resolution in Congress. And that was only possible because of that outside power. And the powers that be recognized that. AIPAC, the Israel lobby, spent $19 million to defeat her in the primary last month. And that's a big blow to the movements and what we're trying to do. But they had to spend that much money to do it, and they only won by 6 points. So there are a lot of things that are demonstrating our power that also, are things that capitalists are noticing, and we have to get better at how we organize. But we're doing it. So you'll hear more about that the rest of this hour. And we're really focused on building the bench from the bottom up. So we're not just again, we're not just electing people to do nice things for us. We're really trying to elect more people who are by and for the working class. So you see that at every level of DSA's engagement in electoral politics. Another example is here in Chicago, Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez. He has a long record of activism and organizing, and he also faced censure in city council because he showed up at protests with for Palestine. So people in power recognize what a threat we are, but if we organize powerfully enough from the bottom up, it doesn't matter what they throw at us because we can take it and we can keep organizing more and more people into it. So I'll just close out by saying a little bit about what we're organizing for here in Chicago. So DSA was one of the organizations that really threw down for the Uncommitted campaign to organize hundreds of thousands of voters across the country to register their dissent from this ongoing genocide. And the Uncommitted movement has been organizing the Not Another Bomb mobilization for an arms embargo against Israel. So that's what you see behind me. I'm here in their office that they've rented for the week. So there's a lot of great stuff happening on the ground and outside the Democratic National Convention to make this a core demand, regardless of what happens at the DNC, regardless of what happens toward the election, to make sure that whoever gets elected, they have to see that there are hundreds of thousands and millions of people who are not just going to be complacent. Like, this is a time when we're building the organizations outside that can't be ignored. So join DSA if you're not already a member, and yeah, thanks for joining us here.
Thank you so much for that, Ashik. Next up, we are going to hear about the DNC, a little bit of history about it, and why DSA is crushing the party. For this section, we have two speakers. We have first Elena Gormley. She is a social worker and one of the co-chairs of Chicago DSA. She also serves on the steering committee of the chapter's Crash the Party DNC campaign. And Sean Duffy will also be presenting, and they are also the other co-chair of Chicago DSA. So Elena, I will pass it on to you.
Thank you so much, comrade. As mentioned, my name is Elena. I am a social worker and one of the chapter co-chairs at Chicago DSA. We are the largest socialist organization in the Chicago metro area, and we have been organizing around crashing the party here at the DNC. Tentatively, we started discussing this the day Chicago was announced, and we have been organizing through a working group and a priority campaign since last fall and this spring. So we are going to be talking a little bit about history. Chicago has been the most popular host for these party conventions. And what we're looking at this week did not fall out of a coconut tree. It exists in the context of everything that came before it. And the context gets pretty intense. So of course, I think a lot of people look at the 1968 convention, where anti-war protesters, both on the convention floor and outside of it, faced an enormous amount of state violence. There were literal fistfights on the convention floor. Police were completely unleashed on predominantly young high school and college students, really demanding the whole world is watching because they were afraid that they were going to get killed by the cops. And of course, that legacy had a lot of political implications around the candidacy of George McGovern and the ascent of Richard Nixon with a very hardcore law and order platform. But that was not the most recent time that Chicago has hosted the DNC. The most recent time was 1996, which was essentially a sort of feting of Bill Clinton as the incumbent candidate. Was really centered on the prosperity of the 90s and the Clinton administration. We know that that Bill Clinton, through triangulation, passed some absolutely horrific austerity policies, particularly around air quotes welfare reform that really negatively hurt working people and poor people across the United States. But it was considered a success because there was not very overt state violence. Richard M. Daley saw this as a way to move past the legacy of his father, Richard J. Daley, and he invested a lot in he was not a socialist, but he invested in a lot of what we would consider sewer socialism. He used the convention to get a lot of funding in order to improve city infrastructure, to improve transit, to improve the sewers, to literally plant new plants all across houses on the near west side by the United Center. There was protest, but they were not very unified, and there was a lot of police, and there was a lot of surveillance. What happened with 1996 is we kind of saw a predecessor to how police would respond to World Trade Organization protests in Seattle in 1999, and how the police would respond to Occupy Wall Street or during the NATO conference here in Chicago in 2012, which did lead to the arrest and the trial of what's known as the NATO 3, who were basically entrapped by undercover officers and charged with terrorism. So all of that sort of global war on terror law enforcement complex that we see at these large events was really rooted in 1996. Again, we're building off the context that comes before us. The other sort of thing is Richard M. Daley used the 1996 convention to really advance sort of urban renewal along the West Loop and the near West Side. There was a very forcible displacement of unhoused people, a lot of effort around gentrifying what was historically a very working class neighborhood. And what this means is that if you are here visiting in Chicago, you're going to notice that around sort of the near West Side where the convention is, it's where all the union halls are. But those union workers cannot afford West Loop rent anymore. So that's thinking about how all of these, there's a lot of pernicious after effects of 1996 that sometimes go unnoticed, but they've certainly been felt here in Chicago. And we are seeing some of that here. There's a massive police presence here currently, really impacting working people's ability to get to and from work, drop off their children to childcare, run basic errands. That's really disproportionately impacting working class people. And we have been also seeing a really aggressive displacement of unhoused residents, people being forced out of tent encampments into shelters, and then people in shelters getting kicked out of the shelters to make room. And this is, of course, also all happening under a progressive mayor. So I think that there's going to be some political implications around the convention this year that we're going to have to really consider and analyze as socialists. As mentioned, we do have 6 endorsed socialists in office in our city council. We have an endorsed socialist in office on the Cook County Commission. And as was mentioned, we have, in the run-up, we have seen some rather awful Red Scare targeting of our local socialists. The most egregious one was, as mentioned, Comrade Byron Sigcho Lopez, representing the 25th Ward in Pilsen, not too far from the United Center, facing a censure attempt because he supported really basic things like free speech, the right to protest, and Palestine, which socialists have been leading on for more than 100 years. So there's a lot of local DNC legacy that we want to consider, which is why as soon as we got the news, we really wanted to organize around crashing this party. Working people are not invited to this party, which is why we are going to crash it to demand a robust political alternative and an end to genocide. And on that note, I will turn it over to my fellow comrade co-chair, Sean Duffy.
Thanks, Elena. I'm calling in from an undisclosed location here in Chicago. If you see anything going on in the background, please ignore it. As Elena mentioned, our sort of slogan for our DNC campaign here in Chicago has been to crash the party and crash the DNC. What does it mean to crash a party? I don't know if any of you have ever had the experience of not being invited to a party, but there's really two things you can do. You can stay home alone and think poorly about yourself, or you can show up and crash the party and make life hell for the host. Democrats in Chicago and the DNC would love it if everyone here in Chicago stayed home, ignored the fact that our entire city is being maneuvered around to welcome the Democrats, to turn on CNN or whatever channel is playing the DNC. I don't know, I haven't been watching it. And to just cheer on the Democrats from our couches and not take notice the fact that none of us, 99% of working class people here in Chicago, were invited to the convention. None of us have a role to play or a voice in the Democratic Party. And whether the nominee was Bernie Sanders or someone else, whether it was the Republican convention or the Democratic convention, anyone who's lived in a major city during a major event, whether it's a national political convention or the Olympics, or as we've suffered through 2 years in a row here in Chicago, NASCAR, it sucks. If you live in the city, your entire routine gets fucked up by the changing of public transit, by the street closures. As Elena mentioned earlier, we've really seen the really horrific violent clearing of encampments of unhoused folks who are some of our most vulnerable residents who are just trying to have a place for shelter, and those have been closed for safety reasons. It's really insulting, I think, to working class people here in Chicago that our state and city governments are prioritizing welcoming Democrats so they can have their little convention here in Chicago, rather than building a city that works for all of us, that takes care of the needs of the unhoused folks, of the most vulnerable people among us. And I think another reason we're here to crash the party is because we want to make our voices heard. The unfortunate thing about political parties in the United States in 2024 is they're extremely Byzantine. We have very little voice in shaping politics as we know it through the traditional political system. In a traditional political convention, delegates could come and gather and make decisions, debate, and adopt a party platform and nominate a candidate. DSA takes democracy very seriously, which is why if you've ever been to one of our national conventions, it's full of rigorous debate and voting. The Democratic National Convention, not unlike the Republican National Convention, is a big commercial. It is 4 days of Democrats cheering themselves on, patting themselves on the back. And if you're a minority in the party, if you're a dissident voice, good luck having any coverage whatsoever. We want actual democracy in all of our lives, from our workplaces to our political system. And so we're also crashing the party because we, as working class people, want a voice in politics. And neither the Democratic Party or the Republican Party are giving us that voice right now. And as has been mentioned already, the number one reason why we are crashing the party and crashing the DNC is because of the horrific ongoing genocide in Gaza that is being funded by our tax dollars and that has been led in support by President Biden with very little dissent from Vice President Harris and from most Democratic Party politicians, aside from a notable few that have been mentioned earlier, especially Rashida Tlaib from Detroit. It is unconscionable that our tax dollars are being used to fund war crimes, and if for no other reason we're showing up to crash the party because we do not want to be complicit in the genocide that is happening, and we are calling on Vice President Harris and all Democrats with power to immediately end U.S. aid to Israel, to fund people, not wars, and for a complete and total arms embargo on Israel. We also would love to see the Democrats adopt any sort of working class agenda. Kamala Harris has already ditched Medicare for all, single-payer healthcare, which is something she committed to somewhat when she ran for president in 2020. We'd also love her to actually take decarbonization of our economy seriously, which we've yet to see from her for the rest of the Democrats. We know that we can't leave it up to politicians to change the world. which is why we're trying to get masses into motion to crash the DNC and to demand peace and demand a better world for all of us. Here in Chicago, we've spent the last couple of months going out and trying to spread the word about the March on the DNC. We passed out about 6,000 of these palm cards and had hundreds of conversations with working class people about why they need to march on the DNC and the power they can have through mass demonstrations and mass peaceful action. And finally, again, the reason why we're marching on the DNC is because we're tired of a two-party political system where our voices don't matter and where the capitalist class has two parties and workers have none. We know that we can't just declare ourselves a new party tomorrow. We need to build a foundation for that by building mass working class organizations through DSA, through the labor movement, and through social movements. But we know that to get there, we need to have an oppositional approach to both the Democrats and the Republicans, which is why DSA marched on the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee last month, and why we're marching on the DNC this month here in Chicago. So if you didn't have a chance to make it to the march on the DNC on Monday, join us for the last major demonstration, which will be Thursday at 5 o'clock here in Chicago at Union Park. It's going to be a great time. We'll have thousands out in the streets demanding a just peace in Gaza, and I hope you'll come out and make Democrats' lives hell, because they deserve that.
Indeed. Okay, thank you, Elena and Sean. Next, we are going to talk about the Not Another Bomb campaign and the labor organizing that's happening around it. For this section, we will have Ryan Andrews. Ryan is the co-chair of the DSA National Labor Commission and also a rank and file member of United Teachers in Los Angeles. And we'll also have Abdullah Farouk, who is a grad worker and UAW member at the California Institute of Technology and a member of DSA LA and DSA's National Labor Commission as well. So from that, I will pass it on to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Walida. It's good to be here with you all. Yeah, I'm Ryan. I'm here in LA. As Walida said, I'm a teacher in Los Angeles. So I want to speak a little bit to the fact that, this money that's going towards slaughtering Palestinian children and women and men and families, it should be spent on funding our schools. It should be spent on housing my students and their families. In LA, 80% of our students are living below the poverty line. 80% of our students are people of color, and 15,000 students were unhoused last year. That was a 19% increase from the year before. We're probably going to see that keep rising. And so being part of a militant union like United Teachers Los Angeles, it gives us a sense of what's possible when we use our collective power through a union that is reformed to be a democratic and militant union. And we heard from one of our officers who was part of that transformation, Gloria Martinez, as well as a number of other speakers on a call that we put together very quickly on Sunday. So if anybody was not able to make that call, I believe Francis has a link. Yes, putting it in the chat for you all. Please do watch that. It's worth the hour of your time. We heard from amazing labor leaders who have been doing this work, building their unions, building the labor movement, which, as Ashik had alluded to, that's the only way that any of these bigger picture things have been possible. And so in UTLA, we bargained for the common good. The first thing we reached in our contract negotiations last time around when we were bargaining for our contract was a memorandum of understanding with the district, Los Angeles Unified School District, around converting unused LAUSD properties into public into social housing, housing for our students and their families. Obviously, housing is the number one crisis here in LA, and that's the same for a lot of our cities throughout the country. And so we are able to fight for these things at the local level, and it's just so exciting that we are fighting this genocide, fighting our tax dollars going to funding this genocide, and we're fighting for our tax dollars to go to the things that we need, that our families and our communities need to thrive. So please do check out that call. A number of asks were made on that call. First of all, the Not Another Bomb petition. Please do sign that if you have not, supporting an arms embargo. So Alexis Zaydan, the campaign director for Not Another Bomb, emceed our call the other night. and made this and one more ask, which was to encourage delegates to become ceasefire delegates. So I think Frances has both of those links as well, and she can put them in the chat. When I'm done speaking, I can also put some stuff in the chat as well. But please do sign that petition if you haven't yet. And if you know any delegates, please make sure that you get this other form in front of them so they can commit to being ceasefire delegate. A lot of our delegates that we might have access to simply don't even know this is happening. There is some kind of organic organizing happening at the DNC, but we want to make sure that we're maximizing our ability to make DNC delegates become ceasefire delegates. I wanted to just also give credit to Abdullah. Abdullah and I put this call together. Really, he and I did the bulk of the work, and it was a major undertaking that we did at the last minute. So I want to give a shout out to him, and I'm going to introduce him to speak to the amazing work that he's been doing, including with the folks that we organized this call with the other night. So I'm going to pass it over to Abdullah.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Yeah, so just to reintroduce myself, I'm Abdullah. I'm a graduate student and a member of the UAW and a member of DSA LA. I also, before we get going, I want to give a special shout out to Amanda, who is our amazing NLC staffer who worked really hard with Ryan and I to put that call together. So I want us to like kind of refocus as well on the fact that, you know, right now, we're not really crashing a party, right? We're living through and bearing witness to a genocide. And all of our political energy has to be focused on winning an arms embargo. We have to stop arming the perpetrators of this genocide. And right now, we're contributing 68% of the weapons that Israel uses. So it's our absolute duty and obligation to expend all of our political energy to end this transfer. What's also really important, what's also been touched on already, is that the demand for an arms embargo is allowing us to reach a broad swath of the American working class that's been suffering for decades from austerity politics, right? Why are we spending taxpayer dollars on bombs when we don't have universal health care and we're faced with skyrocketing rents, an underfunded public education system, a climate crisis that necessarily requires massive amounts of public investment? So in the face of all of this, the Not Another Bomb campaign has been organized. And I want to give some context to this. For people that don't know, the Uncommitted campaign has been able to capture more than 500,000 votes across the country, right? Effectively putting Palestine on the ballot nationally and organizing this incredible campaign basically overnight. They were able to win 36 delegate positions. And after that, they launched the Not Another Bomb campaign, bringing together this amazing group of progressive political organizations to fight for an arms embargo. Their petition now that Ryan mentioned has garnered more than 70,000 signatures, including many delegates to the DNC and including people that are committed, right? So, and that reflects the over 50% of Democrats right now support an arms embargo. This campaign that Uncommitted has put on also coincided with the National Labor Network for a Ceasefires campaign that organized 7 massive unions, including my own union, the UAW, to call for an arms embargo. And so we're seeing this incredible convergence. And this was also launched around the same time as the Palestinian Youth Movement launched their campaign for a people's embargo, right? By pressuring weapons logistics firms like Maersk to stop putting civilian mariners at risk and end commercial transport of weapons to Israel. So we were really happy to host organizers with all 3 of those organizations on Sunday to discuss the role of labor, and please check out the recording of that call. So why does labor matter to all of this, right? The labor movement has really, really enormous political and economic leverage that it can use to fight for a working class foreign policy. And we can think about this in kind of 2 ways, to borrow a framework from my union sibling and comrade Rohan at Caltech. We can think about it in terms of politicizing labor and then laborizing politics. So we have to keep politicizing labor, right? And we've seen this incredible amount of involvement from labor on this political demand for a ceasefire, and now this political demand for an arms embargo. And more union members than ever at the level of the rank and file, at the level of staff, at the level of leaders are being engaged in this. And so we need to continue to keep pushing this demand, right? Whether it's through the rank and file strategy, whether it's through one-on-one bridge building with our organizations and our unions, and big coordinated efforts like the National Labor Network for a ceasefire, and continuously activate more and more of our members. We also need to laborize politics, right? So unions already play a really key role in politics, but they often don't assert their own political positions on issues like an arms embargo as a unified labor movement. So the call for an arms embargo and the kind of amazing organizing that Uncommitted has been leading of many of our delegates, many of whom are union members, are just really amazing examples of what a left-led labor movement that's united on these political positions can accomplish. And so we really have to think about how we push this forward and how do we continue bridging labor's political organizing with the Uncommitted coalition until we can end weapons to Israel, not just in this moment, but for the long haul. So before I finish, I also want to make a quick plug to donate to the Uncommitted campaign, which is continuing to organize at the DNC. And that's really hard work that they're doing. And so if you could donate, I think Francis will be dropping the link for that donation in the chat. I also want to just say that, like, I think at this moment, it's really possible for us to fall into nihilism. And it feels like the power of this militarism is kind of inescapable. And I want to end with a quote from Walid Daqqa, the longest serving Palestinian prisoner who passed away in prison a few months ago. He says, from within prison, "It's hard to be optimistic and believe in life when there is so much destruction and death in our region. But the refusal of death is a fragile faith in life. And fragile faith is preferable to surrender. This heretical faith is strong and penetrates every wall and crosses every barrier because it cannot be categorized. This heretical belief is the new religion that grows out of a revulsion at destruction and ruin, and out of a strong desire to live. Heretical faith is spreading and is carried by Arab and Jewish mothers and parents as a prayer that their children will be the last victims. Thank you."
Thank you. That was very beautiful. Thank you very much, Abdullah and Ryan, for that. We are now going to move on to our next section. And don't forget, you can also always drop your questions in the chat if you have them for any of our panelists about any of these sections that we're discussing tonight. Next up, we have JP Leninger, who will talk about DSA's national political program, Workers Deserve More. JP recently won the primary elections for city council in Louisville and is uncontested in the general election. So he will be seated, I believe, in January, sometime later this year. So congratulations to JP. And also after JP will be Francis Gill, who is a DSA member and also serves on DSA's National Political Committee, who is a member of Los Angeles DSA. So JP, I will hand it to you.
Right. Thank you, Walida. The For Our Rights Committee was created at the 2023 DSA National Convention, and the 2024 program has been the primary task of that committee. And I'm proud to say that this was the finest committee that I have ever served on and been a part of. So what is the 2024 program? Well, we know that the bosses have two parties, and we know that we need one of our own. There's a genocide in Gaza, worker needs are being ignored, fascists are filling the neoliberal political vacuum across the world, and the Democratic Party platform unveiled at the DNC is warmed over. It doesn't even remove references to Biden. Trans rights are a political football, just like abortion access has been for decades. You know, where did all of that get us? We've got a party that is basing their political program around calling Republicans weird. Are Republicans weird? Yes, I absolutely agree they are. But do you feel confident that pointing that out is going to keep us safe? Is it going to improve people's lives? Is that politics? Where is the vision for a better world? It's not in there. So we need to make it for our own. That's what the 2024 program is about. It's about acknowledging that Americans are working harder and longer for less than ever before, less than countries that have political parties explicitly built around the needs of workers, and less than what our parents and our grandparents had. We need political leadership that isn't afraid to name the problem that we're facing, which is capitalism, and a movement ready to take the fight against that problem to every corner of our lives. We need a movement that's ready to stand up to fascism. And that's not going to happen in the Democratic Party, which is completely beholden to the financial interests, to Wall Street, to mega donors. Neither party is capable of advancing a positive program for the 2024 election that meets the needs of workers and the majority of Americans. We need something different, something real. We need to build the power of the working people to take democratic control over our lives, over our government and the economy. And that's what democratic socialism is about. It's about democratic control of our lives. And that's why I organize with DSA. The greatest struggles of our lives, climate change, staggering inequality, genocide, the Democratic Party is doing nothing to address these. They keep saying that we won't go back, but we are going backwards. We're going backwards right now and have been for years. We're going backwards on civil liberties. We're going backwards on protections for the working class. 6 years ago, Democrats demonstrated at the border against the inhumane policies of the Trump administration, and now they're promising greater cruelty, chasing what they imagine is a political majority at the center. We need big systemic change to build a world where all of our basic human needs are met: housing, food, healthcare, clean water and clean air, freedom from oppression and war. Politics is in the millions. We aren't there yet, but we will be. And the 2024 program is, in my opinion, our first big democratic grassroots step in that direction. There's just more of us, and we can take control of our lives, but it's not going to be handed to us. It won't show up magically on a ballot for you to vote in. We have to create it through movement, and that's you. You, the working class, can be the protagonist of the next chapter of our history. We can fix these problems. This year, defeating the far right, protecting the rights of the working class, from the US to Palestine, and fighting for democracy are our top priorities. Through our grassroots struggles, we are going to build a movement with the power to take on the capitalist class and build an equal, democratic, and liberated world. For the next few weeks, we're going to be orienting toward the 2024 elections. There's no way around the hard truth that there isn't a candidate that represents our politics in either of the major parties. There are still things we're going to be fighting for, like joining with the uncommitted delegates as they organize for Biden, Harris, and the rest of the Democratic Party to finally end the arming of Israel and supporting their buildup towards a larger regional war. If not a moral imperative, then as a necessary choice. If they want the votes of the workers and the people across this country, the young people in the colleges that organize for ceasefire, they need our votes. And so we're going to tell them, if you want our votes, genocide is a red line. We're going to be standing with workers as we continue to rebuild a militant labor movement in this country, taking on the bosses at Starbucks, Stellantis, at Tesla. We're going to be talking to our family and our friends, our classmates and our coworkers about how begging for unelected elites for bodily autonomy was always built on a foundation of sand, and only our collective power can save us. We need you for all of this. The 2024 program for DSA is a roadmap to get us there. So what is in the 2024 program? We're talking about building a thriving working class communities. We're talking about Medicare for all. We're talking about ending the war on drugs. We're going to fight mass incarceration and police brutality. We want college for all and housing for all, and to support working families. We want an economy for the working class, a 32-hour work week. We want to build union power to protect workers' rights to strike and form a union, and make it easier for workers to join unions. We want a Green New Deal, and we want to help build the infrastructure of that Green New Deal by taxing the rich and not just accepting a world where they set the financial policy of this country. We want to build working class foreign policy that means a free Palestine and an end to the US war machine. We want freedom of movement for all workers across the globe and no more economic warfare against countries that don't fall in line with the United States' current hegemony. We want a working class democracy of universal suffrage, a representative Congress, and to reduce the power of the Supreme Court. We want a popular vote for president. This platform is building a platform for DSA chapters across the country to build a new political party for workers, a socialist party. Join DSA if you're not a member, get involved in our local chapters, and whether that's helping elect the next Richie Floyd in St. Petersburg, the next Zohar Mamdani in the New York State Assembly, or the next Rashida Tlaib in Congress, get involved in our electoral work. Get involved in our labor work, whether that's organizing your own workplace or supporting workers as they take on the bosses on the picket line. Get involved in political education or outreach or tenant organizing or wherever you can get involved, because we're building power for the working class, and together nothing can stop us. Because our ultimate goal is a new political party, one that's for the workers, for us together, and that's the only way we're going to get there. Francis?
Thank you, JP. Yeah, definitely couldn't have said it better myself. And I wanted to just take a little bit of time. My name's Francis. I'm in DSA Los Angeles. I'm also on the National Political Committee for DSA and was on the committee that helped draft the Workers Deserve More in 2024 program. I wanted to just take a minute and talk about the many ways that you can get involved in the Workers Deserve More program. First off, if you're not already a member of DSA, definitely would encourage you to join. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. But this is not just this program is not just a list of things that would be nice in the world to have. It's a list of things that we can absolutely fight for and a vision for the world that we deserve. And we can do that by taking this program out into the community and talking to our neighbors, our coworkers, our other community members, and really bringing folks into that vision for a better world. And we can do that in a number of ways. So just to give a little bit of teaser, we have this beautiful pamphlet and this beautiful vision of what could be. In just a couple of days, we're going to launch the website, and we'll also have a number of organizing tools so that chapters and chapter leaders and members can use this to start conversations in their community about what DSA is and bring people into DSA. So we really want to be using this as a way to bring people into the movement and bring people into the organization. Ashik talked earlier about we have to build that political alternatives through organization, through working class institutions. And that means, bringing people into DSA and bringing them into the work. So this year is an election year. People are paying attention to politics more than they are any other time in the election cycle. And so that's an opportunity to talk to folks about what is missing from our political system and what can be. And when we're having those kinds of conversations with people, we can be bringing them into DSA. So we're going to have all kinds of organizing tools, including a canvassing guide. We're going to have a tabling kit so that folks can, be using this program to be tabling at farmers markets, community events, and talking to people about DSA. And we're also going to have slides so that you can talk in your chapter about what this program is about and how to bring people into DSA, and be doing DSA 101s and recruitment events, and taking this moment where people are really paying attention to politics and looking for that alternative and saying, hey, we've got one right over here, and it's our socialist organization that we're building for the long haul. So yeah, thanks for setting me up perfectly there, JP, and I will pass it back to Walida to take us to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Francis and JP. So the next, I'm going to switch the next slides a little bit. I'm going to now go to Why Join DSA with Megan Romer. Megan is the other national co-chair of DSA, along with Ashik, who we heard speak first. She's also a mom, an organizer, a writer, and a PTA member based in rural central New York. So Megan, take it away.
There we go. Yes, I dual card with the PTA and also DSA. So I want to talk to folks tonight about why you should join DSA. I suspect a lot of you are already DSA members, but if you are not, I want to encourage you to join DSA today. You can see the link on your screen and we'll post it in the chat, dsausa.org/join. And we're talking a lot tonight about sort of high level, the sort of big things that DSA is fighting for, but I want to sort of bring it down to the nitty gritty because I want you to think about yourself as a DSA member and what it would mean to be in your local DSA chapter. So I just did a quick little scan through of some of our chapters, what they're working on literally this week. to give you an idea of what it might mean to be a DSA member wherever you are. So if you are in Birmingham, Alabama, you might be joining your chapter this week for something called Street Solidarity, where you're doing mutual aid work and outreach to the houseless community and to folks who are teetering on houselessness to try to help them find the resources they need to stay in their homes and also organize. If you're in Berkeley, California, you might be hitting the doors, as we say, which means door knocking and talking to your neighbors about two things at once: a divestment campaign to pull city funds out of Israeli companies, as well as a candidate for California State Senate who has chosen specifically to run with that divestment campaign at the heart of her campaign. So you'd be talking to voters about both those things. If you're in Los Angeles, you might have joined a sip-in today to show solidarity with workers at the USC Village Starbucks who had their vote today on whether or not to unionize. If you're in Denver, Colorado, you might be joining your comrades later this week at the weekly Aurora City Council meetings to demand answers surrounding the police murder of Kylan Lewis. If you're in Hamden, Connecticut, you might be at the bar drinking with your comrades celebrating the primary election of Lori Sweet for state representative in District 91. If you're in Metro DC, you might be lacing up your shoes for a canvas with their housing justice program, which has one of the best names, SOS, Stomp Out Slumlords. They're going to be canvassing tomorrow at the Woodley Road Apartments to inform tenants about the Endangered TOPA Act, which gives tenants the first opportunity to gather together and buy their apartment building if their landlord wants to sell it. If you are anywhere in Florida, you're probably going to be working with your chapter sometime this week to fight for Amendment 4, which would codify the right to abortion care within the Florida Constitution and help stave off the creeping fascism in the state. And there are picket lines all over the country. If you're in Chicago, you might be on a picket line with the nurses. If you're in Atlanta, you might be on a picket line with CWA workers. If you're in Ithaca, New York, you might be joining Cornell University UAW workers. And that's not even the end of it. So that is the kind of thing that you will find yourself doing to help build this Workers Deserve More program, to help build DSA, to work with your chapter and your community to fight for the things that we deserve as workers. So again, join DSA, dsausa.org/join. Your membership means everything. We're a mass movement org and we need people and we need you. So we hope to have you with us soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan. If I wasn't a member, I would join today. That sounded like so much fun. So that is it for our panel discussions. We can move now to the Q&A. We just have a couple of questions for our panelists. The first one I will pose to Elena, the Chicago DSA co-chair, and it is: if people can't attend DNC actions this week, what else can they do to help?
That is a fantastic question. I'm going to start by repeating some of what Comrade Megan just said. And we have this beautiful slide up with all of the links. Not Another Bomb is continuing to do distributed actions across the US. They did a whole weekend prior to the DNC starting on Monday, but we're going to continue to see those actions. You can definitely learn more about an action near you. And these are actions across the U.S., including small towns who would not expect mass action, and that is because this really is a popular mass movement with mass demands. We also have some donate links. If you can't donate time, if there's not much going on near you, certainly please support Not Another Bomb. Please support Chicago DSA's Protest Supply Fund. There's definitely, no matter where you are, that support is going to be really essential to continue powering organizing across the U.S. I would also say, like, all of the links to signing the uncommitted petition. I know that we all got really, really good at this starting in 2017 and many of us prior. But yes, calling your reps, being that very annoying person that politely calls your rep, please get to the point where the staffers know your name. It is very important that people still hear this while everyone is kind of in celebration mode, to understand that a lot of people are demanding this. We'll also say We do have a nurses strike here, so please support their strike fund. UI Health is a regional safety net hospital, not just for Chicagoans, but kind of in the entire sort of Chicago metro region. So please go and support those striking nurses, and really learn how to talk about your politics at work, at socials. I'm sure that did you see X, Y, and Z is coming up in the water cooler discussions or in the break rooms? Find ways to articulate your perspective in those conversations. That might be a conversation around, well, the favorite person I listened to last night was AOC and Sean Fain, and maybe explain why. Maybe that can lead to a conversation about your working conditions. Talk to people, talk to people, talk to people you're seeing at bars or restaurants, wherever you're socializing. Start to really have those conversations. If people have questions about, what your approach is going to be for the 2024 election, talk about Workers Deserve More and the Far Rights campaign. I think that's a really important aspect. I think sometimes we can self-select and only talk to the people we, who've already politicized. But I think, considering, the late Jean McAlevey, we have to really spend most of our time talking to the people who aren't politicized or are starting to get there. And those kind of conversations is within your social circles, your workplaces, your bridge club, your PTA. Those are really, really essential to really start to advance those politics. So definitely, you can definitely do that in person, online, wherever you are.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So the second question we have is, what is DSA's orientation to the general election? How are we advising on any particular way to vote? What are our thoughts on what people should do in terms of the actual vote this November? And I believe Sean is going to answer that one, and Francis as well.
Yeah, DSA does not have a position on who to vote for in the general election. What I would say personally is that I am also very tired of having to vote for the lesser of two evils. The only way we're going to break out of this vicious cycle of constantly having to vote between a extreme right-wing candidate and a not so great center candidate is by building working class power. So if you are not thrilled about your options in November, join DSA, build a labor movement, build social movements, because that's the only way we're going to change things. Voting is important. You should go and vote, but the voting is in many ways the least that you can do. Build political power. That's what's going to change it, so that in the future, we're going to actually have a real socialist candidate who can actually win a general election.
Yeah, Sean covered it 100%. The thing I was just going to say is, like, at the end of the day, DSA is not going to endorse Kamala. We're not going to endorse Trump, obviously. And the decision that you make on election day is really like between you and God, not between you and DSA. But no matter what you do, like Sean said, the tiniest thing is that vote that you cast on election day. And maybe that's like the tiniest thing you do, but what you definitely need to do is be a member of a working class organization like DSA. Be out there fighting for socialist candidates to win office. We have candidates who are going to be on the ballot in November in all across the country, including in swing states. We have a socialist who's running for office in Georgia, going to be on the two socialists who are running for office in Georgia that are going to be on the ballot. And get involved in your union, just be a part of organization, be a part of working class organization. And that's the most important takeaway any year, and especially in an election year.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. Those were pretty much the only questions we got. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to thank all the panelists. And again, join DSA. Grab those links in the chat before you log off, before you head out tonight, so you have them all. Again, thanks everybody for joining, and hopefully we'll see you in the organization in DSA.